So it's a big step toward reducing the size and scope of the federal government, and it's something the airline industry supports. Now, this president chose to orate this agenda item, unlike many others where he tweets them. Either way, there is little doubt that this, the 45th president, is the most communicative in U.S. history. But is that always a good thing? Joining me now from our bureau in Washington, D.C., adjunct professor of communications at American University, Dorian Davis. Dorian, I would say that President Trump is an unprecedented communicator. If you look at the totality of the way he communicates, especially in the advent of social media. Barack Obama had many, many followers on social media, but he didn't exploit them per se in terms of communicating with them like Donald Trump does. In fact, I would go as far as to say, with all due respect to the 40th president, move over Ronald Reagan. I think that Donald Trump is now the great communicator.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Graham. It's great to be here. I agree with you that this is unprecedented. It's nothing new for a politician to try to circumvent mainstream media, but the extent to which Trump has used Twitter to counter-program coverage that he doesn't like of himself and his administration is revolutionary. And you're right, this is something that even Barack Obama, whom some have called the social media president, was not able to do.
Yeah. And so it's a two-edged sword, though, if you think about it, because if he is communicating to his followers on Twitter, one would assume that probably the vast majority of these followers are people who already support the president, therefore are going to probably support many of the things that he happens to say. So the challenge is getting those people then to, in turn, retweet these messages to people who may not be following the president of the United States on Twitter, right?
Right. You know, it's a double-edged sword for him on so many levels because, first of all, he does have this direct avenue to communicate with the people who supported him during the election and continue to support him today. And he's able to, as you said, share his agenda items and put his own spin on those items without going through those gatekeepers in the mainstream media. On the other hand, his job as president, especially if he runs for re-election, is going to be to appeal to the middle, to appeal to people who haven't bought in yet to his agenda. And I do think there's some question about whether some of his Twitter vendettas against Kathy Griffin and others are really moving the ball forward in terms of his agenda and appealing to people who didn't come out for him the first time.
In other words, they could be getting in the way of the messaging. We have a few of the president's recent tweets just from the last 48 hours. This is tweet number 1, has to do with the mainstream, or social media, I should say, and the mainstream media. The fake mainstream media, that's MSN, mainstream media, is working so hard trying to get me not to use social media. They hate that I can get the honest and unfiltered message out. They do. I mean, let's face it, the mainstream media hates the fact that the president can go directly to the American people. But on the other hand, the mainstream media at first was reporting virtually every tweet. Now they have learned to filter. And so what if the president of the United States sends a tweet out and then nobody in the mainstream media pays attention?
Well, I'm so glad that you highlighted this particular tweet because, you know, he claims a lot that the mainstream media doesn't care about what he says and that he's getting through to the people without that filter. But the mainstream media aggregate on Twitter. Twitter is the journalist medium, and I believe that they have been paying quite a bit of attention to him from way back in those first Megyn Kelly tweets in 2015. They might not have always respected his message, but mainstream media have followed his message and reported on his message, I think, from the beginning.
All right, so let's look at tweet number 2 that I selected. This has to do with the mainstream media. Sorry, folks, the president says, but if I would have relied on the fake news networks, I would have had zero chance of winning the White House. And he's probably correct on that to a certain degree. I don't know. He might have still won. But the bottom line is the mainstream media, I believe, this mainstream media, I haven't seen a feeding frenzy like this in my lifetime, frankly, since I've been paying attention to politics. So certainly it happened during Richard Nixon, during Watergate. It happened to a certain degree during Ronald Reagan. But this is constant. It's a constant onslaught. It's coming from all directions. And Donald Trump is the target of all of it from the mainstream media.
Well, I think two things are happening there. Number one, he is the first president to tweet so often for himself, to share so much of his unfiltered thoughts on social media. And that humanizes him and it resonates with his base. But political news media are used to covering White House communications teams that do parse every word. And so it's frustrating for them, I would imagine, to filter through some of the covfefe typos and some of the hyperbole to get to the substance. And then secondly, you have him using Twitter to go after mainstream media pretty frequently as the fake news media. And it's very hard to engender a sense of camaraderie, a sense of trust, even just the positive coverage that he wants with news media covering the White House if he's constantly attacking them.
And those typos you talk about, like covfefe, or Kofefe, however you want to pronounce it, not only humanize the president of the United States, but it also proves that he's tweeting probably the vast majority, if not all, of the tweets from his account, for good or for bad. In fact, that's been confirmed by Corey Lewandowski, his former campaign manager, who appears on this program from time to time. So I think in the big picture, the President of the United States is a trailblazer, if you will, for other presidents down the road. We shall see. Dorian, thanks.